Hello everyone, our topic this week was requested by Jesse Gartung. We'll be going over Bhaal from the Baldur's Gate series. Spoilers for the Baldur's Gate series, I guess. Duh.
Okay, so Bhaal is a god from the Forgotten Realms universe, perhaps most famously known for his involvement in the Baldur's Gate games. As such, we need to do some world setup before diving into anything else. Forgotten Realms is a fantasy world, one of the most widely known campaign settings for Dungeons & Dragons, but also the setting for numerous games like Baldur's Gate, Neverwinter Nights, and Neverwinter the MMO. It's also the setting for a metric ton of fantasy novels, notably the Drizzt Do'Urden books. The Forgotten Realms setting centers mostly on the world of Toril, was originally penned in the 60s, and has been expanded upon by dozens and dozens of writers in the years since. In this world of swords and sorcery, monsters and mayhem, there exist many gods, immensely powerful, virtually unchallengeable beings who have power over domains, or aspects of life and reality. They require the worship of mortals to sustain their existence. The greater the number of faithful they have, and the more zealous their worshippers' belief is in them, the more power the gods possess, regardless of their sphere of influence. Bhaal is straight up the god of murder. And he's also effectively the impetus for the entire storyline of Baldur's Gates 1 and 2. In fact, his religious symbol is the logo for the Baldur's Gate series.
Bhaal was not always a god. In Forgotten Realms, there are a handful of ways to ascend to godhood. Most commonly, you somehow take the power of a domain from a god, such as by stealing worshippers, killing the god in question, or somehow usurping power over an aspect of their divine portfolio. For example, it's not uncommon for a god to deliver a significant blow to another god by, say, killing a powerful servant, corrupting divine artifacts, or the like, in an effort to steal power over a part of the second god's domain. A lot of the gods hate and actively work against each other, which makes sense, because they're gods for almost everything, so there's going to be some kind of clash. For example, a god of nature would probably combat the actions of a war god whose subjects are raised in the countryside as they conquer the region. In times long past, Bhaal was one of a trio of evil and merciless mortals. His two companions were Bane and Myrkul. At some point, the three of them banded together with a single shared goal. They all wanted to ascend to godhood and would do literally whatever it took to gain that power. After numerous adventures, they even managed to slay one of the 7 forgotten gods, with each of them getting a small spark of divinity from their fallen foe as a result. Afterward, they determined that they would hunt down the god Jurgal, one of the most powerful gods of the time, known as the Lord of the End of Everything, and take his power and station. To that end, the trio traveled to lands that Jurgal called home, and the three mortals crushed the innumerable hordes of undead that stood between them and the god of death, from the lowliest skeleton to the mightiest of liches, which are some of the most powerful undead in existence. Nothing could stand before them, and eventually, the trio stood before Jurgal's throne.
Much to their surprise, Jurgal immediately offered the throne to the trio, asking only which of the three would take his seat as god of death, even offering to assist them in their deific duties until such time as they were ready to do the job without him. You see, Jurgal had grown tired and apathetic. He ruled over all things dying, dead, and gone, and so for him, existence was just a long wait for the presumable end of the universe, where he would either still rule over the ashes of time, or also fade from existence along with everything else. On top of this, Jurgal was old, even by God's standards. He was tired and done. Some sources even indicate that Jurgal manipulated events to help the trio to get to this point once he discovered their plans. However, upon being offered the prize they'd long sought, Bhaal, Bane, and Myrkul immediately began fighting amongst themselves over who would get to claim the throne. Jurgal feared that they'd all kill themselves or spend so long fighting that he'd just have to keep doing his job anyway. So, the god of death proposed that they split his vast portfolio among themselves and play a game to determine who got first pick of his domains. First, Jurgal suggested a game of skill, skull bowling. Yes, really. Which was subsequently sabotaged. So, next he suggested a game of luck. Ripping his own skeletal fingers from his hands, Jurgal tossed them to the trio and invited them to play a game of knucklebones, which for we modern types is basically a game of jacks, where you toss a bone in the air and try to pick up as many bones in one hand as you can before the first one falls, catching the thrown bone as well. Bane won the game, giving him first pick, and he became the god of tyranny, terror, and hate. Myrkul took second place and became the god of the dead. Bhaal lost the game and took what was left, murder. Each by this point openly planning to use their respective domains to usurp the powers of the others over time. Jurgel stayed on as steward for Merkel, who most directly assumed the major point of Jurgel's duties.
Thus, the trio came to be known as the Dark Three, a cadre of frenemy deities who would collectively draw the ire of nearly every other god in creation and earn the worship, fear, and hatred of mortals the world over. But that level of power and influence, which we should stress was incredible, wasn't good enough for them. After centuries had passed, Bhaal and Merkel conspired together to try and steal the power of Ao. Ao was a special god, a being known as an over-deity or over-god. Basically a god of gods. Unlike the other gods, Ao didn't require the worship of mortals, nor did he even interact with them. Instead, his purpose was to maintain the fabric and balance of reality. In fact, beings could only ascend to godhood or usurp the powers of other gods if he allowed it. So if he hadn't given his silent okay, even the Dark Three themselves would have stayed mortal all those years ago, no matter how disinterested in his job Jurgel had become. Ao had in his possession the Tablets of Fate, mystical objects that, among other things, helped regulate the physical laws of reality, separating the planes of existence from one another. Bhaal and Merkel mistakenly came to the conclusion that the tablets also held some of Ao's power, and stole them, hoping to take whatever portion of Ao's strength was hidden within them. They were disappointed in their endeavors, but more importantly than that, these actions led directly to a period in history that would come to be known as the Time of Troubles. Once Ao realized the tablets were gone, he summoned all of the gods and demanded that the culprit or culprits step forth. No one stood forth. This duplicity, combined with Ao's growing dissatisfaction with the way many of the gods seemed to be disregarding their stewardship of their mortal worshippers, led him to an explosive decision. Ao cast all but one of the gods down to the mortal world, trapping them in their avatar forms, and declared that they would live among the mortals until the tablets were returned to him. One god he allowed to maintain his power and status in return for guarding the entrance back to the divine realm so that none of the gods could return without the tablets.
In their avatar forms, the gods were all weakened significantly. They were still incredibly powerful, far beyond the scope of most mortals. However, they were effectively mortal. They could be slain, and many of the gods took advantage of this, using their time among the mortals to rally their worshippers and not only search for the tablets, but capitalize on the weakness of their enemy gods, more vulnerable now than they'd ever been. Thus began the Time of Troubles. Before the Time of Troubles saw its end, each of the Dark Three would be slain, either by gods or mortals, earning the name the Dead Three, as their influence continued for decades and centuries after their seeming demise. Bhaal in particular was slain by a mortal man named Cyric, who was wielding a sword that was actually the god of trickery in disguise, which is also the only reason Cyric could harm Bhaal in the first place. Bhaal died pursuing one of the tablets which had long since been lost to him and changed hands numerous times. For slaying Bhaal, Cyric was given Bhaal's status as god of murder, and once the Time of Troubles had ended, also absorbed the portfolios of Bane and Merkel, granting him all of the powers once held by Jurgel.
That wasn't the end for Bhaal, however. Years before accidentally setting in motion the events that led to his death, Bhaal foresaw his coming end and hatched a plan. He descended to the mortal world and sired numerous offspring, creating demigods in nearly every land and of nearly every race and creed. These children, later known as Bhaal spawn, would be visually indistinguishable from normal members of their race, but would have a spark of divine power within them, granting them fantastic abilities and, as children of the god of murder, a thirst for conflict and bloodshed. Bhaal then designed a device in his deific home that would collect the fallen souls of his children, believing that they would seek each other out and destroy one another, drawn Highlander style into mortal combat until none remained. He then entrusted one of his most faithful priestesses with the knowledge of rites that would allow those collected divine souls to merge and see Bhaal reborn from the deaths of his progeny.
This is, in essence, the driving force for the plot of Baldur's Gates 1 and 2. Initially unbeknownst to the player, the protagonist of the games is one of the Bhaal spawn, and hero or villain, you cut your way through your demigod half-brothers and sisters, Highlander style, before coming face to face with Bhaal's High Priestess, who, unsurprisingly, had been channeling the fallen Bhaal spawn into herself in order to ascend to take Bhaal's place. Because of course she was, there is no version of this story where she didn't try that. Come on, Bhaal, seriously? The player defeats the priestess and is then faced with the choice of ascending as the new god of murder, keeping in mind that you can make what you will of your godly role. The god of death who replaced Merkel is a decent dude, for example. Or allowing your divine power to be sealed away forever and living life as a mortal. Stories and modules have been written since the release of Baldur's Gate 2 almost 20 years ago, which has since canonized the character from the games as a man named Abdel Adrian, and subsequently canonized a few of his choices, most notably his final decision. Abdel abdicated divinity and continued life as a mortal for roughly another 100 years, making him quite old but in surprisingly divinely influenced good health for a human. thinking that he was the last of the Bhaal spawn until the events of the Murder in Baldur's Gate module, an official D&D adventure in which Abdel is confronted by the last of his remaining Bhaal spawn brethren, and the two clash. Regardless of who emerges victorious, the victor is turned into a hideous monster. We kept making parallels to the Highlander series because with each slain Bhaal spawn, the remaining Bhaal spawn all grew in power. Whoever the final Bhaal spawn was, they were overwhelmed by Bhaal's power and corruption, and are eventually slain by the D&D party playing through the module. With the last of the Bhaal spawn slain, Bhaal's plan finally comes to fruition, and he is returned to life, ready to begin reclaiming his power from the likes of Cyric and others.
And that's basically Bhaal, Forgotten Realms' god of murder. We hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave us a like and share it with someone you know might like it. If you have ideas for more videos in the future, do like Jesse Gartung and let us know in the comments down below. If you'd like to see more videos from us in the future, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, and if you'd like to see more of our Let's Plays in the future, head over to our gaming channel and subscribe there.
In the meantime, this has been True Masters and Morons, signing off.